Good morning, everybody. I'm Reese Barrick, and I'm here in the dome, and as we bring you the dome from home again this morning. And today, I decided to come hang out in the herbarium. Now, we haven't talked a lot about plants lately, and it's something I get a lot of grief about sometimes from Dr. Joe Thomason about, hey, plants are important too, which I totally agree with. So today I thought we'd visit a little bit about plants and in the herbarium, and I'll also have a little fun at my own expense here in a little bit. But the herbarium is a very important and cool place in the museum, and it has a lot of history, as a matter of fact. The herbarium's been around a long time. It was originally a part of the Fort Hays. Before it was Fort Hays, had a botany department, and they ended up hiring a gentleman named Elam Bartholomew, who we can see here, who collected all kinds of plants from all over here and traded plants with people all over the country to come up with a really huge collection, great collection of plants and rusts or fungi, all kinds of cool things. And he really built up the collection in the beginning of the century, last century. Man, time flies when you're having fun. All right. And through his work and lots of other people's work, there we got a picture of Elam out in the field. And another one of our famous botanists at Fort Hays is Howard Reynolds. There's Howard out in his yard. He had a great, and we've got all kinds of cool pictures of Howard in his later years. He died just a few years ago at the age of 99, and he almost made it to 100. Howard was a great gentleman, and we have our nature trails named after him. And then, of course, we also have, let's see, some pictures of, there's Joe Thomason, who is the most recent botanist at Fort Hays, who also was the curator of the herbarium. So, matter of fact, this is kind of interesting. We still have the statue of Dr. Reynolds' dog that he always had with him on campus. So I have a statue of him here in the herbarium. Other cool things. Did you know that Kansas, for the sesquicentennial, made cards of some of the more famous people of the state? And there's a card of Elam Bartholomew. Wait, Legacy of Science in Kansas? Oh, there is a card for Dr. Thomason. And I don't know, Howard Reynolds was always called Happy Howard, but you don't see Dr. Thomason very much without a smile on his face either. Anyway, so just a sort of a little introduction, but what do we have in the herbarium? We have plants. Well, how do you keep plants? Well, it's really pretty simple. It's kind of a fun thing to do. You go out and collect leaves and branches and things, and you stick them between newspapers, and you put them in, a plant press. It's very sophisticated stuff. You get some sort of brackets with some belts and things, and stick your plants with your newspapers in between some corrugated cardboard, and you tighten them down and flatten them so they get a chance to flatten and dry out. What do you end up with? Well, if you're really smart and a professional like Dr. Thomason, you end up taking your plants and you put just a little bit of glue on them on some archival paper. And here at the Elam Bartholomew Herbarium. We put a stamp so we know they belong to us in the herbarium. And then they also need a tag with all of the information about the particular plant. So here's a prunus, has the family Rosacea, and you get locality information. Where did it come from? And what kind of perhaps soil was it in, or what were the conditions of where it was found? North roadside ditch, dry to moist, rocky, sandy substrate. And you always put who the collector was and when it was collected. This one was just collected by Joe last year. Pretty cool. So this is what an herbarium sheet looks like. And generally speaking, you get more than one individual of any particular kind of plant. And you put all of the herbarium sheets with nothing covering them. Notice that this is actually still just the actual plant with just a little bit of glue to pin them onto the herbarium sheets. And this is after they've been pressed and dried. You put all of them together into a sort of essentially what becomes kind of like a book of the plants into sheets, and they end up then going into the collections. So the library is really kind of a interesting library. This is what it looks like when you get into each of the cabinets. Is divided up into a whole bunch of different slots, and each one has sets of these different folders, and each folder has a number of let's take a look at this one. Fagaceae quercus, that means oaks. Oh, sure enough, there are oak leaves in here. And if we want to go down and take a look, Quercus bicolor, a swamp white oak. And again, you can see soil, habitat. This is from Frontier Park, collected in 1979 by Howard Reynolds. Imagine that. So we have essentially a whole library. Make sure this goes back where it came from. So we have libraries of plants, and these are all modern plants. And each of these cabinets has labels, so it's pretty easy to find what family and what genus of plants that you're looking for. And it's pretty amazing. What's also fascinating is that there's still a lot of work to do here. If you look up high, you see what look like plastic garbage bags, but what's in each of these bags are basically boxes full of plants. And they're generally full of dried, pressed plants, but if they're in these boxes, they haven't really been identified, labeled, put onto sheets. Sometimes they're still in newspapers that they were originally collected in. And that's another fun thing about an herbarium, like we talked about with the shells yesterday, is that you get all kinds of cool newspapers. So this is one that I just think is really funny. So there were some plants collected that are in the herbarium that were pressed into the Denver Post. And you can tell sort of the age of the Denver Post. What were the exciting things going on? The sheriff was convicted as a booze ring chief. The water board plans to gouge Denver for more millions. And Pittsburgh won the World Series. Oat crop of Colorado smashes records. And we can always find out that, Open Arms welcomed the Prince of Wales on his homecoming. So all sorts of fascinating things that you can find out from looking at herbariums plants. This was back in the 1925. Denver's population was over 325,000. See, there you go. Who knew? So, just another side fun fact about what you can find in an herbarium. All right, so I said I wanted to have a little bit of fun at my own expense. If you want to see how some other ways plants are collected and not necessarily in the appropriate way. I joked because when my parents passed away, we went home to clean things up, and we found all kinds of stuff for each of the kids that my parents had saved for a long time, and I mean a long time. So when I was going through things, I found that my mom had saved a whole set of plants that I had collected as a Boy Scout. Interesting enough, so when I was 12 or 13, I was working on environment or botany merit badge, and so I had collected a whole bunch of plants. And so for my collection, you can see, for example, here I had written in the scientific family names, the genus, species, common name. You don't see common names all the time in an herbarium collection. And uses. So this was Salix babylonica, or a weeping willow. Now, the interesting thing is you can see that I didn't glue things onto archival paper. I got some sheets of thick paper, but then I taped the leaves on and then put some, pretended like they were photos, and basically sealed them in permanently. So this is part of my collection of leaves from Osage, Iowa. So it's kind of an interesting thing because it brings back some memories, but it also is kind of startling because it reminds me exactly how many different types of trees were found in Iowa. So, for example, everything that over here that I'm showing you are all different oak trees. There are lots and lots of oak trees in Iowa. So as a matter of fact, if we look, we've got pin oaks. We've got blackjack oaks. Northern pin oaks. And let's see, red oaks. What do we got over here? Post oaks. Bur oaks. And let's see, what do we got over here? Swamp white oaks. This is assuming I got them all right when I was identifying them. Let's see. Common white oak. So we have oak trees galore in Iowa. We also have a variety of other fun trees. Interestingly enough, we've got, here's eastern cottonwoods. Cottonwood being our state tree for Kansas. And you can tell the genus Populus that it's very closely related to things like, oops, here we go, quaking aspens, very popular in Colorado. We have Lombardy poplars. Oh yeah, poplar trees. White poplars. And over here is big tooth aspens. So this is just kind of, so these things were all collected back in around 1976. So amazingly, some of them are still around. These things survived enough that you can actually see them a little bit, but not the exact way you want to make a collection if you're collecting scientifically for a permanent herbarium. But hey, it's a fun thing you can do, and it's a really cool thing you can do as a kid or with your kids, is to go out and make collections of leaves. You learn a lot about the trees and the diversity of trees you have in your area. And you learn a little bit about the scientific nomenclature, how things are identified, and it sort of leads you in a whole new world of appreciating nature and what we have out here. Now, Western Kansas, not quite the same diversity of trees, especially once you get outside of town, but there are a lot of very cool trees in Hays, especially if you go out onto the campus at Fort Hays, where there's lots of cool trees. One thing that I have, if I can find it, I learned something fun and interesting about some trees. Where did it go? I lost it. Oh, here's my favorite tree growing up. The American elm. Had two huge ones in my yard. Dutch elm disease wiped them out. As with most American elms, you always have bunches of different hybrids that you can get for an elm, but American elms are no longer around. Let's see. Other cool things. Tree that I hated the most when I lived in North Carolina was also in Iowa. Liquid amber. Sounds like a really cool thing. Sweet gum trees. They're really neat, but they've got the worst seeds that fall all over the place that you step on. Oh, you have to wear shoes. It's a real pain in the butt. Oh, Elmer's got plant and fish collections from when he was in college. Cool. We need to see those. Let's see. There were a few pine trees, apparently, yes, in Iowa. And I guess I'm not going to find the one. I saw a basswood leaf in here at some point in time, which is cool because one of the things that I hadn't realized when I was in Iowa, basswood trees were out and they weren't in town. And I didn't realize that they smelled had flowers that smelled so amazing in the spring until I was here in Hays, Kansas. But anyway, we've got tons and tons. Who would have known? Hackberries, choke cherries. So all kinds of cool, fun things. And it's just kind of fun and a little bit embarrassing to see how I collected these versus how they look in an herbarium the way they're supposed to be collected. Let's see. Oh, yes. Interestingly enough, we looked at a whole ton of different oak trees. My hometown was actually called Osage, the city of beautiful maples. And what do I have? I have a red maple, which are the most gorgeous things. And, of course, the sugar maple, which, if a marvelous place if you can ever get to Vermont, or in Canada, definitely you have to buy Vermont maple syrup. My daughter lives in Vermont, so she goes through 12 gallons of maple syrup. Her uncle and cousins actually have a maple syrup business. They tap all the trees there. So it's an amazing operation to watch and see all the taps running the sap and where they boil it. And I think they make like 5,000 gallons of maple syrup every year. And one of her cousins actually lives in Colorado and gets her dad's and her cousin's syrup and hauls it off to Colorado and sells it there as a business, which is pretty cool. Oh, Jesse made collections in college for weeds. That's kind of fun. All right, let's see. Where else? Oh, what else I was going to go with this? One of the things, and tomorrow I think I will get into. I'm going to probably go over to the paleobotany collection. So we'll look at some fossil plants. And one of the things that's interesting about looking at modern trees is that you can look and start to understand the past by understanding the present. So one of the things with all of these leaves is you can look at their margins. Their margins all around here, and oftentimes they have serrations in them or crenulations, and so they're not smooth margined leaves, right? And so there are different types of margins of leaves, whether they're serrated like this, we have little sawtooth edges, or whether they are lobed, like a lot of these oak trees have lobed leaves. Sometimes the lobes are you have things where they're crenulated. They have teeth on the margins. They can be closer to being palmate, or this is about the closest one I get to that's close to an entire margin leaf where there's no serrations or crenulations on the edge of them. What's cool about leaf margins is that they can tell you a lot about temperature, climate. So the more teeth, the cooler the climate is the question. Well, you're jumping right on it. Yes, there's lots of studies of modern forests, and there's a couple ways of looking at it. You can look at the percentage of different species that have sort of entire margins versus ones that have teeth, and that can give you, and then they measure the mean annual temperature for that given area, and there's a correlation between the number of species with teeth on the margins versus entire smooth margined leaves for temperature. And so that's one thing you can do then with going to fossil leaves and reconstructing fossil forests is you can reconstruct the mean annual temperature by looking at the fossil leaves and seeing how many of them have serrations. There's also a more complicated one where you can, instead of just using one variant, you can look at all of the different types of serrations or teeth or crenulations on the leaf margins and have that give you a little better correlation of what mean annual temperature is. And yes, the more teeth, the more species with teeth, the cooler the climate. That is correct. You can also look at leaves and look to see what their tips are like and whether they have really long, narrow tips at the end of them. And if they do, these can be called drip tips. And leaves that have really long tips at the ends of them generally also come from wetter or climates where you get more rain. So by looking at the leaf margins, you can really get a good understanding of climate. And I'm sorry I'm using my 13-year-old collection of leaves for showing you some of these things, but it was the easier thing than to try to pull out everything out of the herbarium because I'd get in real trouble if I didn't get things back to where they were supposed to be, or if I messed them up a little bit. So we get a chance to have a little fun at my expense for seeing my particular plant collection as opposed to the marvelous collection here at the Sternberg in the Elam Bartholomew Herbarium. And I just think, let's see, as we can look at more, I mean, pretty amazing collections of plants here. But again, we have lots of things that go from either still in boxes or some that have not gotten labeled, not gotten put into our digitized data set yet. So there's still lots of work to do. Specimens that don't have identifications yet. We've got all sorts of things still left to do. Working on typing labels. So there's still more identification, more putting these things and getting them cataloged and into the cabinets. So the herbarium has still got lots of, it's a huge, amazing resource, but there's still lots to do. There's just, even back here, you can see all kinds of labels, need species, IDs. And there's some cool ones over here. Bill Eastman, we actually have some Hawaiian plants. So he collected plants in Hawaii. And he liked to use the New York Times. So even though he's in Hawaii collecting plants, he had New York Times. Here's April 25th, 1954. You can check out the carousel cottons from B. Altman Company. And as you open them up, you find, wow, looks like some kind of fun fern. Oh, shoes. And holy smokes. Ochroma pyramidale. Jeez. See, now this is where, from Hilo, Hawaii, Bombaceae, on the other hand, this is where I'm at a loss. See, this is where I need the common name because I don't know what this is. Sorry, but we didn't, when I took plant morphology and plant taxonomy in Cornell College in Iowa, we did not have any Hawaiian plants. Here's a ditch trail in Kauai. Now, I have been to Kauai, but I did not make a plant collection there. I'm not really allowed to do that anymore. Hydrangeas. Cool. So we do have, actually, an amazing little collection of plants from Hawaii that you might not expect here in Kansas, but it's pretty cool that Bill Eastman made a collection from Hawaii. Anyway, let's see. Oh, Mike's still got rocks and fossils and aquatic insects from his master's thesis. That's pretty awesome, but rocks and fossils from his teens. See, so this is something that, I don't know how many teens still do this. There's a couple teens in my house, and one of them is supposed to be starting to make his insect collection for 4-H projects. But anything you can do to get your kids out into nature and make collections gets them started on understanding nature and science, and really can be something that's fun to do and you'll have basically for the rest of your life, especially if you or your parents keep them for you. All right. Anyway, I think that's kind of just a fun jump into the herbarium today. Let you know that, yes, plants are important. We love plants here at the museum. And I think Ian will be back with us today at 2, but I have not talked to him to figure out what it is he's talking about. So anyway, I think I will check out. Please keep giving us likes. We appreciate all of your following us and the sharing, and we really I enjoy, say we, it's me today. I know Ian loves having the chance to interact with everybody and sort of let you know that we're still alive, we're still having fun, and we want everybody to continue to be safe, that even though we're distanced from each other, because we do have such cool technology, we can still be together at least a couple times a day. So I appreciate all of you guys, and I will be around tomorrow morning, and Ian will be here this afternoon. So from the Dome, have a great day.